Operettas were a staple at the Muny in its first 50 years, so much so that 9 operettas are still among the 21 shows that have been presented in 8 or more seasons. The Desert Song is still the second most produced show of all time at the Muny. Those were the days when opera followed Muny in the theater's name. Nowadays, we have to look to other companies with opera in their name to see operettas. One of those companies is Winter Opera St. Louis, which just presented The Student Prince by Sigmund Romberg and Dorothy V. Donnelly. It was a great success on Broadway, where 608 performances followed the 1924 opening, and at the Muny, where the show was mounted 3 seasons in a row starting in 1928. I expected a lot from Winter Opera's Student Prince because it had the same stage director and conductor as last year's excellent production of The Merry Widow. Dean Anthony's direction and Scott Schoonover's conducting did not disappoint. The acting on stage and the playing in the pit both enlivened a show in which the plot moves at a leisurely pace between songs that delight without advancing the action. The stage direction and the musical direction both enhance the comic atmosphere. The basis of the story is a romance that was not meant to be. At the start, Prince Karl Franz of Karlsburg is sent off to the University of Heidelberg to live there as an ordinary student. Andrew Marks Maughan looked and sounded the part of a prince at Winter Opera. More importantly, he projected the reticence of a young man who needs social seasoning after leading a sheltered, regimented life as the heir to a fictional throne. At the inn where Karl Franz is lodging, the server is a lovely young woman named Kathy, portrayed with the utmost charm by Caitlin Sisler. The ensuing romance seems inevitable. Just when Karl Franz and Kathy are ready to commit fully to each other, duty calls the prince back to his kingdom. The king is ill, and Karl Franz must return home for the ceremony of betrothal to the princess to whom he has been promised since childhood. Duty wins out when the title character is no longer a student or a prince. This ending worked at Winter Opera because of the maturity Karl Franz and Kathy acquired in the portrayals by Maughan and Sisler. All the singing and orchestral playing at Winter Opera were first-rate. John Stevens stood out as Dr. Engel, Karl Franz's devoted tutor. Stevens was a stalwart of Opera Theater of St. Louis in its early days, and his return visits are always welcome. Gary Moss was appropriately snobbish as the prince's valet. Jacob Lassiter was an amiable presence as the innkeeper. Ellen Hinkle kept the prince's intended from becoming the villain of the piece. The show looked great thanks to J.C. Krychek's sumptuous costumes and Scott Lobel's scenic design. The perspective in the backdrop for the scene at court was marvelous. The production benefited from John Ontiveros' lighting, Nancy Maya's choral direction, Laura Skrosker's props, Jessica Dana's wigs and makeup, and Tony Hunicke's super titles. Winter Opera season is off to a great start, and it isn't even winter yet.
Yes, and I always appreciate good acting in opera performances, and especially somebody who really do comedy, which Gary Moss as the valet did very well, I think. But let's hear some of that music.